Welcome to MissouriNet.com. I'm Bill Pollack. This is really one of my favorite weeks of the college football season for the Missouri Tigers in particular because, one, we're starting SEC play, and two, we get to take on the South Carolina Gamecocks, and every time we do that, we get to visit with our buddies from our sister network down in Columbia, South Carolina. It's Kevin McCrarey from SportsTalkSC.com. Kevin, glad to have you with us.
Glad to be here, and I send Kornblut's regrets because he really wanted to come on and talk a lot of smack like he did last year before this game, but he is up in Clemson covering Dabo Swinney today, so he could not be here. But he did want to say he regrets that he's not able to talk some smack, and we don't have Will here, who was his #1 recipient for the smack talk.
Yeah, I have the two level-headed guys from both networks. Matt,
what a shame this is! What a shame this is!
I mean,
that barbecue was delicious, though. I was glad. I mean, Corn Smack Talk did pay dividends last year with that barbecue.
And for those of you who did not see the hangout last year, Phil Kornblut, very opinionated. Will Pelagic, very opinionated, was working for our affiliate KTGR at the time, has since moved on. Both of these guys, I would say, and I think this is safe to say, I would say Will was more of a homer. And I think Phil just more liked to get into the side of Will. And man, who doesn't like to get on Will's bad side, kind of dig him a little bit. But Phil basically coaxed a 4-pound barbecue bet out of Will, and he took it, and it looked like for 3.5 quarters that Will was going to win, and then the following Monday was going to be bragging, and then Andrew Baggett lined up for that 20-something yard kick, and we know what happened from there. So, but Kevin, you were down there though, and Will paid up the bet.
Yes, I was at that game. Was a remarkable game. I've seen it several times since. It was a definite definition of an instant classic, and that barbecue, I got to hand it to you. South Carolina won that game, but Missouri wins the barbecue battle against South Carolina every day and twice on Sunday.
Now, Matt, does this game or does last year's game have any effect on the Tigers this year at all? Are they using that as motivation, something to remember about the fact that this is the only team in the SEC East that Mizzou has not beaten yet?
Maybe individually, I'll say this much. I think that the fact that Connor Shaw might be on the sidelines for this game in Columbia, South Carolina, might be the end of it because he is Mizzou kryptonite, and I've believed that forever. He's got an off week with the Browns, so it looks like he's going to be there at the game, which is terrible news for Missouri because 2 years in a row he was the one who basically beat the Tigers, in my opinion. Death by 1,000 cuts in year one. Then, of course, last year with all the screen passes and stuff, doing a hero performance in the game. Listen, players might remember this in the back of their minds, but it's not personal to a lot of these guys really on the Tigers because a couple of years ago they might have been on the sidelines and not really playing in the game if they're seniors. And then last year, of course, there were maybe a couple of returners who might remember it. I look at it more like Missouri has to take care of its own business this week because that game against Indiana was such a poor performance in so many different areas that I think they're going to be worried about, number one, and not worried about whoever they were playing, whether it was Florida International, Florida State, or South Carolina, or anybody.
Yeah, and we'll get to that Indiana game here in a moment. You talked about Connor Shaw being on the sidelines. Kevin, ESPN Game Day is going to be there, and the last 2 times that College Game Day has been there at South Carolina in Columbia, they've been big wins. I think they were in the top 5 matchup with Georgia and won, and then I think in 2010 Alabama was #1 or up there, and Carolina knocked them off. So they seem to play well on this big stage. And for Carolina, they're halfway through with their SEC schedule after this week, and this is the first of 8 in a row for the Tigers. So they are certainly battle-tested.
Yeah, the Gamecocks have played some very good teams. Of course, Texas A&M is very impressive, and they spanked the Gamecocks in the opener. East Carolina, Gamecock fans were disappointed that was only a 10-point win after the game, but as we're seeing now, ECU's pretty good. They went up to Virginia Tech and won, hung 70 on North Carolina last week. That's a pretty good team, and they pulled one out against Georgia. I mean, that was a remarkable win for them. Not many people expected it. Yeah, Connor Shaw is going to be on the sideline for the Gamecocks, and they're talking about him being the celebrity starter before every game. They have somebody as a celebrity starter to rile up the crowd, and that's probably going to be Shaw's role this weekend. But unfortunately for the Gamecocks, he won't be able to come in the fourth quarter if the Gamecocks need a bailout again like he was last year. But where the Gamecocks really needed a bailout, guys, is defensively. They are not anywhere close to the same team that they were a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago. Defense was kind of the name of the game for South Carolina for most of the Steve Spurrier era here for the past decade. And this defense, to call it leaky would probably be a compliment at this point. I don't even think they're a leaky defense right now. They're just a poor defense right now. Vanderbilt hasn't been able to move the ball on anybody, and they were getting plays on South Carolina's defense, and they gave up, a couple of 100-yard kickoff returns in that game too. So Steve Spurrier this week, they didn't lose like Missouri did against Indiana, but Steve Spurrier has used the word embarrassed a lot. He called it the worst win he's ever had at Vanderbilt. So both of these teams seem to be coming into this game really more concerned about how poorly they're playing than who they're playing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. That's Kevin McCrarey from SportsTalkSC.com. And Matt Michaels from KTGR in Columbia joining us. And we go to that Indiana game, Mike. So, Matt, so you hear the talk about South Carolina's defense giving up some big plays, and that may be music to the ears of Missouri because they've got some question marks. We'll start with the offensive line. Anthony Gotti hurt. He's done for the year. Brad McNulty will move over there. They're changing around Mitch Hall out of the starting lineup. Connor McGovern moving from tackle to guard. So they're flip-flopping some things. And then Darius White, one of their top 3 wide receivers, out of this game with a groin injury. So Mizzou's got some issues offensively. Is this the type of break that the Tigers are looking for?
Yeah, I think so, to be quite honest, because I've watched a little bit of what South Carolina has done on defense, and some people would say that Missouri has done a lot of the same thing. There are a lot of concerns here in Columbia, Missouri about just what this defense can be. A lot of big plays in the running game. That's what you hear from a lot of fans. Oh, the run game's no good. Well, day to day it is, but then when you let up a big play, it throws everything out the window, and that was part of the reason Indiana was able to beat them. I think the offensive line, it can't play much worse for Missouri than it did in the Indiana game, and I keep coming back to it. It was a performance that was unexpected by me. It was a performance unexpected by many. I guess the benefit is that right now I think South Carolina is only on pace for something like 13 sacks this season, so they've not gotten a lot of pass rush pressure, and that has been a problem last week and even a little bit in the earlier weeks of the season. Matty Mock has been trying to do a hero job because he's had too much pressure at his face. So they're changing the guards. The interior of the line has kind of been the problem, especially last week. And they're going to see what happens. I can't say it's not a question mark, but then again, I look at this game and I say, what Missouri's done over the past year and a half is so far different than what they did on the field against Indiana. It's almost hard to tell what exactly they're going to come out with against South Carolina. I don't think they're as bad as they showed this past Saturday. I'm not sure they're as dominating as maybe they showed against the UCF, where they gave Matty Mock all kinds of time. But one thing's for sure, if the defenses can't quite hold up in this game, and the offenses are going to maybe, fight it out, this could end up being a shootout type of game, because there are some questions on the back end for Missouri so far, especially in the run game if Mike Davis gets going this season.
Well, one thing that will help the Tigers is the fact that Marcus Golden will be back on the defensive end position. He had that hamstring strain the Wednesday before the IU game, so they sat him out. He'll be out there. Now, Kevin, is it true that has South Carolina not given up a quarterback sack yet this season?
I don't know is that true? I haven't checked to see if they have 0.
Their pass protection seems to be outstanding, though.
Yeah, their offensive line is very good, especially on that left side. They have A.J. Cann and Corey Robinson, and those are 2 guys that will be playing on Sundays. And certainly their offensive line is their strength this season. And, they had a drive against East Carolina. It was a 1-possession game in the fourth quarter, and the Gamecocks put together an 11-play drive that took up about 10 minutes. They ended up kicking a field goal, but that's how they got that working margin. And they can line up and just power you. Now, Steve Spurrier likes to throw the football. He threw the first 9 plays of the game. He was passing against Vanderbilt last week, and that's still what Spurrier likes to do, is throw the ball. They really haven't let Mike Davis get going right now, and their backup running back, Brandon Wilds, is dinged up right now. He might not play this week with a shoulder injury. So how the Gamecocks come out offensively, if they try to control the ball more, run the ball to protect that defense, because I'm just not impressed with the Gamecock defense. And you hit on it with the offensive line struggles of Missouri. Well, that might be negated by the defensive line struggles at South Carolina. They don't have an elite pass rusher, and everybody knows Clowney was obviously elite, but even before him, South Carolina always had a guy that could get to the quarterback that you had to watch out for. They don't have that guy this year. They're not getting a lot of pressure on the quarterback, and that's combined with the secondary that has a lot of true freshmen playing. Not a good combination, and I think Matty Mock, if I'm Matty Mock, I'm licking my chops for this game right now, and if I'm Pinkel, my plan is to go out there and attack, and I agree. I think this is going to be a high-scoring game. I think it might be the first 1-30 wins this game. I just don't see these defenses really stopping each other.
And maybe 40. But, Matt, here's the problem with Missouri's offense, though. Darius White is out. So you've got Bud Sasser and Jimmy Hunt. But after that, the rest of the wide receivers have 2 catches. Now, you've got 7 or 5 from Sean Culkin. You have some out of the backfield with Marcus Murphy and Russell Hansbrough. But two catches from Wesley Leftwich in the South Dakota State game, and that's it. He doesn't have a lot of weapons to throw to. Is that going to change this week, or is that a big hole right now for Missouri? And it's something we've talked about, Matt, since the beginning of the year. They don't have a lot of depth at wide receiver.
Yeah, there have been folks worrying about the depth at wide receiver. I think it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation here. Maybe Darius White and others have been getting the playing time because they're the best option, and maybe Missouri's been hanging around close in games. I'm not entirely sure that it's a lack of an option. One thing Wes Leftwich has is speed to burn. They've known that here in Columbia for a long time. He was at Hickman High School right here in town, so people know he's fast. He's gotten a couple opportunities to catch the ball. He's going to get the start. There are other options, but again, like you said, Bill, they're just unproven at this level, and they are a wild card. With that being said, Bud Sasser has been getting most of the targets at the end of games anyways. He seems to be the most reliable receiving option for Matty Mock in crunch time, and Sasser has come down with some ridiculous jump balls and adjusting to it. He runs really good routes. We see Jimmy Hunt as well. He scored a touchdown pass in that game against Indiana on Saturday. The two of them are pretty good threats. I mean, they're not Dorial Green Beckham. You won't have to worry about that on the South Carolina defense. But even then, they're good wide receivers. They're not, chopped liver. They're not just out there to be there. They're able to make some plays. And I agree with you, Bill, that Sean Culkin over the middle is something that the Tigers need to take more advantage of. Here's a guy that's a pass-catching tight end in the mold of a Martin Rucker, in the mold of a Chase Kaufman when they had such success, even All-American success at Mizzou. And he's not been used that much in the passing game so far. Mock hasn't really gotten a rhythm with him. I don't know if maybe the routes are a problem. This was a team that didn't throw to the tight end last year in Eric Waters, but Culkin is such a big dude that it's hard to believe that you're not going to do it. So I would think that would be something that you could see more of against South Carolina because he's got a 6'6", even 6'7" frame, big target over the middle that Mock could utilize in this game.
Perhaps one of the biggest matchups then to watch is Bud Sasser against Bryson Williams. And Kevin, maybe you can talk about this quarterback. 4 interceptions now for his career, and he took one back 53 yards against Vanderbilt. Is he their top quarterback, and is that going to be the matchup to watch for?
Yeah, he is their most experienced cornerback. Actually, he's probably more of a safety by trade. He's playing cornerback just because they are struggling at their defensive backs. They lost one to graduation last year. Their other top corner, Vic Hampton, came out early, wasn't even drafted in the NFL. He's sitting in the stands watching games now. They'd love to have him out there. I think Lorenzo Ward greatly underestimated his lack of depth in the secondary, combined with the lack of experienced guys coming back on their defensive line. They lost Clowney, but they also lost their other starting defensive end in Chaz Sutton. They lost their best interior lineman as well, Kelsey Corals, who's now in the NFL. So they've replaced so much, and finally, after 2-3 games, Spurrier acknowledged that, you know what, we did lose a lot of really good on defense, and we probably need to understand that we want to get better. I think they just want to be serviceable on defense at this point right now. So Bryson Williams did have the pick 6. He's got a little bit of an arm injury that he's been dealing with, and he's been exposed at times too. I think all of the Gamecock defensive backs are vulnerable, quite honestly. Now what they're trying to do more of now is be a little more opportunistic. They didn't force 1 turnover against Texas A&M. They forced 2 against East Carolina. If they can win that turnover battle, if they can get a short field, if they can get an interception, they've been more of a bend but don't break defense. They've been keeping teams out of the end zone. They forced Georgia to kick field goals. Georgia had to kick 4 field goals in that matchup, and they didn't get touchdowns, that infamous 1st and goal from the 4, where they ended up settling for a field goal and missing. That's what this defense defense is going to do. They're going to give up yards. Their hope is they can keep teams out of the end zone and maybe get in Baggett's head a little bit and remind them that those field goals are anything but a gimme.
You know what? The more and more that I hear you two talk about these teams, the more and more I realize that this thing is basically a coin flip. These teams are very similar in the fact that both defenses bend but don't break, and they'll give up yardage, but they try to tighten up as you get to the goal line. And like you just said, Kevin, this may come down to Andrew Baggett getting a shot at redemption. And how big would that be, Matt, for the kicker?
Well, I mean, it would be big, but he's been good this year. I mean, he's been good on his kickoffs. There's a reason he was picked preseason in, I believe, the third All-SEC team by the media at SEC Media Days. I mean, he's a solid kicker. I've never gotten the people who rag on Andrew Baggett. Granted, he had a horrible, horrible miss, and it cost the game against Carolina. But he's pretty good. He absolutely banged one through against Indiana last week, a 50-yarder, or 40-yarder rather, to take the lead, and that would have been the game-winning field goal if the defense would have stood up late on in that game. But, just in general, too, I think that what Missouri wants to do in this game, if at all possible on defense, like you said, Kevin, with the bend but don't break, if they can get 2 yards and a stop on first down, if they can get 2 yards and a stop on second down, if they have Ray and Golden, the defensive line, I've always thought, is just the key to this Missouri team. Not just the defense, because they put difficult situations passing the ball that their cumulative pressure affects quarterbacks. Against UCF, a team with a pretty decent sophomore quarterback in Justin Holman, by the third and fourth quarter, Holman was toast because he was throwing it high and wide and everything. He had players in his face really the entire game. And you didn't see that last week against Nate Sudfeld in Indiana, in part because he got rid of the ball really quickly, in part because they ran a fast ball offense. We're running 2 plays back-to-back, much like Auburn will do at times with Gus Malzahn. And part of it was that Marcus Golden was gone, and Shane Ray on his own didn't get the push. They've got Marcus Loud and Charles Harris as backup defensive ends, but they're not as good quite yet as Golden is. The interior play a good game against Indiana, but Lucas Vincent is a good disruptor. They have a great sophomore by the name of Josh Augusta, who I think might make a big play or two in this game. He just doesn't see the field a lot quite yet. If the defensive line of Missouri can get pressure, Carolina's going to have a hard time at home hanging on because they're going to be forced in third and longer, maybe third and longer than Missouri is in this game.
Yeah, but, Kevin, though, they dinked and dunked their way back into that game last year as we watched the highlights when Carolina came back, and we saw Indiana do that, and that seems to be the type of plays that Mizzou gives up time and time again, where we've seen Toledo do it against them. Dump off the screen pass and let those guys pick up the yards. If Missouri's going to give it to you, you may as well take it. Is that going to be the same type of approach, you think, or is Spurrier going to try to gun it out a little bit here with Thompson?
Well, he's going to take chances down the field. He always does. That's what he's all about. But he's not dumb, and he likes to win. And he also is as good as anybody at finding holes in a defense and realizing what the defense is going to give you and taking it. And that's what they realized. And late in that game against Missouri, he realized this is what they're going to give us. And he took advantage of that. And they have the players. I mean, Connor Shaw is gone, and Dylan Thompson is not as good as Connor Shaw. No one is going to say that, but he is on pace now. He's thrown 12 touchdowns through the first 4 games of the season. He has been very impressive. He's got some weapons out there. We all know that the Gamecocks have one of the best running backs in the conference in Mike Davis. So offensively, the Gamecocks are good, very good, better than good, and they're going to rely on that offense. It's defensively where they struggled, and again, the special teams. They've given up 3 kickoff returns for touchdowns in the past 5 games. In 10 years under Steve Spurrier, the Gamecocks have yet to return a kick for a touchdown. So their special teams play has been poor, and their defense has been poor. They're relying on that offense right now. That's what they have survived on this point, is having an offense that can move the ball and score points, because everything else has been a struggle, which is why Steve Spurrier has been using, again, embarrassed has been his word du jour. He's just embarrassed by the way his team plays and says that's a reflection on him. He said it's not a lot of fun to watch his team play football right now.
You know what? I feel blessed by the fact that I have you two guys with me to preview this game, and ESPN can take all of their experts and Fox Sports and CBS and all them, but you guys know what you're talking about. You cover these teams on a daily basis. And it was great having you on. Great insight. Matt Michaels from our Columbia, Missouri affiliate, KTGR, and Kevin McCrarey from the Columbia, South Carolina Bureau of Learfield Communications and the South Carolina Radio Network. That's a mouthful.
We're everywhere.
Whatever it is. So anyway, listen, guys, it's going to be a great game, and certainly the loser of this is certainly behind the 8 ball for the SEC East. So this is a huge game. Like we said, Carolina gets halfway through their SEC schedule, and Mizzou just rolling along. So, guys, appreciate your time. Thanks for watching us here at MissouriNet.com.